Thank you everyone for joining. I look forward to sharing with you a little bit of how we're thinking about sustainability across IBM from a technology and consulting perspective. Now, I will caveat there's a lot going on at IBM corporate level as well, both in terms of IBM corporate policies and how we're thinking about sustainability, as well as Angie's on the call, what she's leading around IBM Ventures and how we think about venture investments and sustainability. For now, for this conversation, I'll focus more on external facing and how we're thinking about this for IBM. So just to level set, customers are really facing a lot of different challenges as they think about sustainability. You all are probably quite aware of, it at a very high level. It's come up across a lot of different forums. And really the challenge is that companies and organizations more broadly are trying to address increased pressure from regulators, from investors, from customers, and other stakeholders to keep their business, balance revenue, but also address risk and compliance and regulations, and also create, shareholder return and value as it relates to that. So we outlined here a few different pieces around the environmental piece, the social piece, and governance piece that really come to the forefront when customers are thinking about how to address certain issues. And across the board, I will say, really, no matter where they stand, no matter what kind of commitments they've articulated, if you look at the bottom phrase, every single customer and client is really focused on activities to operationalize their sustainability goals and optimizing their operations and cost and reducing their waste and emissions. So it's really good business, right? Our IBM Sustainability POV, and this, by the way, it continues to be a work in progress because we continue to add more to this, but it's really around these big categories. So one, what is the strategy and roadmap that you have in place? What are the commitments that you've articulated or that your senior leadership have articulated in order to drive your organization towards best practices around sustainability? Two, the middle layer, then how do you have a single system of record or a single source of truth that allows you to manage all of the data that comes in to the organization, that helps you understand your baseline and your sustainability posture, and then action it into the business, right? To actually make some progress. That is really challenging for every organization, IBM included, by the way. I don't have a slide on what this looks like, but really, if you think about all the different types of data that come in that could have some relevance for your sustainability posture, it is coming from all different silos, sources, systems, technology. You think about, your energy costs and your travel for your customers, for your employees. You think about your D&I initiatives, what's going on in your supply chain, how to manage your data centers. I mean, they're all coming from different places. So it's very challenging. We're talking about upwards of 600 plus different data sources that need to come in for that single system of record. You can imagine how challenging that is. And candidly, most companies to this day still using spreadsheets to try to manage that. And that is not a way for us to actually make progress against sustainability goals. It cannot be done manually going forward. The three bottom vertical pillars that you see are really the core of any enterprises, organizations, and operations, right? So you think about the facilities like buildings, you talk about their infrastructure and physical assets that they need to manage. You talk about data centers and the cloud and the computing and infrastructure that's needed around their computing. And then you talk about supply chain and making sure that there's transparency and traceability and calculated emissions factors across your supply chain. So all of these three areas provide data that can get fed into the single system of record so that you can make a holistic or understand your enterprise from a holistic perspective, create insights and analytics from that, and then push that back into the business so that they can actually act on it. From an IBM perspective, this is how it all comes together. We have our consulting services that provide support on the strategy and roadmap side. We have several products that help with the single system of record, as well as some scenario modeling around that and risk management pieces and climate risk and all of that. And then we have other products here that support across all the different business operations. So Tririga, for example, we'll talk about this in a little more detail, but Tririga supports with commercial real estate. Turbonomics supports with data centers, supply chain intelligence suite, obviously supporting around transparency and traceability in the supply chain. And so this holistic picture allows customers to, again, optimize their operation costs and reduce waste and emissions. And it's really a huge breadth of and depth, I should say, breadth and depth of solutions that help to address that, right? And it's actually something that we've had informal conversations with some of the analysts on, and they are very open about the fact that, like, there's a lot of competitors in each one of these buckets, but there's not many that can speak to the fact that there's, all this breadth and depth in one place. So really, this is the way we're focused. Let's turn sustainability ambition into action. It's not just about articulating your net zero commitments or saying we need to increase diversity. It's really about how do you create and leverage solutions on both the technology and consulting side to optimize operations and costs, reduce waste and emissions, and importantly, without trade-offs or compromising profitability, right? These five are the five buckets that you saw in the previous category, but this is kind of what we're going to market in. This is what we're talking to our customers about. It's really resonating because a lot of organizations just don't know how to operationalize sustainability rather than just having the goals and not knowing how to get there. So these are some key questions that come up against each one of those areas. As for example, how do I measure my emissions? How do I identify hosts that are underutilized? How do I rebalance a workload? How do I make sure my supply chain is transparent and traceable? How do I make sure that we're extending the life of all the physical assets that we work with in order to optimize our operations and reduce our costs and emissions? And so what I will go through with you here is just walking through each one of these and showing how we're going to connect them, how we have and continue to connect them in order to help support answering these questions. So this one is much more consulting oriented, services oriented. How do we make sure that we're helping organizations to understand what their goals should be, how it's tied to the business, how do they achieve them, what is the roadmap in order to get there, how do we put metrics in place in order to measure that progress? That is at the very top, right? Because you need to make sure that you understand that and articulate that before you go elsewhere. Then that single system of record that I mentioned, where am I today? What's my baseline? How do I make sure that I'm articulating what's needed in order to achieve these commitments that we put forth here? How do I make sure I can keep track of all of the different data sources that I mentioned before, hundreds and hundreds across multiple systems and technology? Oops. And so on that, we have, and I'll show you some of the technology here, we have the Invisi platform that is kind of that data management foundation, analytics and reporting software. And we have EIS, which is our environmental intelligence suite, supporting with climate risk analytics. As you all know, we own the weather company. We own all the data that comes with the weather company. And so there's a lot of really interesting weather-related and climate risk analytics that can be done in order to optimize for different industries and for enterprises. What we're showing here now is as we start integrating that single system of record layer with some of the products in this side, we're actually helping to address and action sustainability. So in that first column, two examples of products there were Maximo and Tririga. Maximo really supports around managing predictive maintenance, operations, life cycle of physical assets. Tririga, as I mentioned, supporting around real estate information and insights and utilization, occupancy, capital projects, lease admin, like all these things in order to reduce environmental impact and energy costs from a building perspective. And so what are we doing as an example? Connecting Maximo with Invisi, which happened last year, allows us to manage the environmental impact of physical asset operations by getting a sense for all of these different data points that can go into that single system of record in order to make sense of an action on that from those critical assets. Same with Tririga. We can benchmark facility performance from real estate and make sure that we are helping to identify ways to reduce waste, energy emissions, and cost by combining between these two as well and allowing for integrations and a real-time data and process flow. If we look at the next column, some examples of products that were in that second column, Turbonomic, which really supports around data center efficiency and energy consumption, Z System and Linux One, IBM Cloud. You all are probably more experts in some of these products than I am, but really, these are great products that can help to increase efficiency, increase understanding of the footprint of the different systems, understand energy consumption, as you can imagine, powerful for sustainability goals. And now tying them, as an example, with Turbonomic, with Envizi, it allows more sustainable IT operations between the connection of the two. So for example, with Turbonomic, you can understand the energy usage that's happening within data centers, and then you can continually kind of reduce that through automation by understanding what's going on, allowing for Turbonomic to do its job, and then feeding that data back into Envizi and allowing the organization to understand carbon impact and reporting and compliance. This also, same with Maximo and Tririga, Turbonomic as well. The connector was done end of last year, and we're actually going to market with it in full force now. And then the last category around supply chain. So we have two products here, Supply Chain Intelligence Suite, which really supports around traceability and transparency in supply chain, and then OMS, which supports around inventory management and order fulfillment, so that there's no waste in your inventory management. And so, as one example here, managing Scope 3 emissions, which is kind of the big piece now. For those of you who are less familiar with sustainability, Scope 1 is essentially everything that's happening, kind of like that you have full control over. So whatever is part of your operations that you can manage. Scope 1, the emissions that are coming from that. Scope 2 is things that you can also control, but it's not ones that's directly in your operations. So energy consumption is one, right? You can decide to turn off lights and save some energy there, but you're not the one that's actually producing the energy. Scope 3 is basically everything else that's in your supply chain. So as you can imagine, very difficult to really get a handle on this, especially if you're trying to do this manually and with spreadsheets, but it's all of the different suppliers upstream and downstream that you work with and all of the emissions that they are emitting tied to your Scope 3 emissions. So you can imagine having an underlying platform like Supply Chain Intelligence Suite that allows for all of that data to get pulled in from a network perspective, and then feeding that into Envizi allows for this accuracy of Scope 3 reporting, and you can get really granular in terms of carbon footprint by product or by SKU or whatever it is. So that's where we're going with a lot of the technology around sustainability and the software that can be tied together, in addition to our cloud and our hardware and infrastructure colleagues. And we also need to, as we say, kind of drink our own champagne, right? Like, what is it that we do within IBM with our own technology to prove that this is useful, that it's something that can be done, and that we have our own story to share here. We see our own improvements so that we know exactly where we can be supporting our customers. One really strong example is our global real estate team. They, as you can see here, 50 million square feet of space, 800 locations, 100 different countries. I mean, an incredible amount of real estate that they need to focus on. And the IBM case did use, as you see on the right-hand side, continue to use Envizi, Maximo, Tririga, and Turbonomic to help support all of the different sustainability initiatives that they're putting in place to manage all of our entire footprint. We have this as a full case study that you have access to online. IBM Hersley, which is also one of our main data centers in the UK. Similarly, we are using the same technology to also support the Hersley efficiency and sustainability story, and it's been an incredible journey. We're continuing to do more and more client zero work, talking with our Chief Procurement Office around supply chain and Scope 3, talking to our CIO office, talking to our CFO office and reporting, our CSR and corporate environmental affairs around reporting for IBM around environmental or social goals. So there's a lot of different pieces, and we're making sure that we can feel very comfortable and also learn from what we're doing within IBM so that we are making good progress against each one of these use cases to prove out to the world that this does in fact work, and we are doing it ourselves in order to prove that that's the case. So I'll stop there. That's all I really had to share in terms of a presentation, Dinesh. I'm happy